friends, it's Lella. Today is the start of a new series on my channel where I give you overly specific book recommendations. I don't do book recommendation videos very often on my channel, but I get asked for them a lot. And I just don't know how to do them because there's so many books. And I feel like if I haven't read every book or every popular book in a genre that I can't accurately give recommendations. So today, I'm not giving you a genre recommendation, not even a subgenre. In these videos, I'm going to pick a very specific element in books that I love and give you 5 recommendations based on books that I love that have that element. Does that make sense? This first video in the series is actually being sponsored by Scribd, which is really exciting, so thanks so much to them for sponsoring my video. And I, as you can see from the title, am recommending books that have a podcast element. I am finding it very hard to find recommendations based on this thing, because when you search books about podcasts, you get nonfiction books on advice of how to start a podcast, or you get podcasts that talk about books, which are great, or you get fiction podcasts that read like books, which is great, but not the recommendations that I'm looking for. So if you've read any of these 5 books and you like the podcast element, or you just want to delve into books that have some sort of podcast element, here are a bunch for you that I loved. Okay, so my first recommendation is a brand new release. It's Sadie by Courtney Summers, which is amazing. It's a YA contemporary mystery. It follows this girl named Sadie who is tracking down the killer of her younger sister, and she wants revenge. It's super dark, and the podcast element of this is, though Sadie knows who the killer is, nobody else really does, and there's this crime podcast trying to find out where Sadie is, what happened to her younger sister, etc. I highly recommend the audiobook for this because every single character is voiced by a different person. It's got like a full cast and it's incredible. So if you want to check this out, it is available on Scribd. Actually, I went and checked and all of these books are available on Scribd right now. So Scribd is an audiobook website where you pay 1 monthly fee. It's super affordable. It's $8.99 and you get unlimited audiobooks. Like, let that sink in for a second. There are no credits. You don't have to pay per book. You pay 1 fee and you can get all 5 of the books that I'm talking about, like right now, just immediately. You can get as many books as you want. So if you want to go ahead and check out Scribd, I have a link down below that you can click on and you get your first 30 days free. It helps support my channel, helps support Scribd, and I mean, I canceled my Audible subscription to sign up for Scribd. Like, I'm paying for it. It's amazing. I recommend it to you. And the Sadie audiobook, I think, is the first thing you should probably check out because it's brand new, it's really hyped, it's really good. Like, really good. When I originally mentioned I was gonna read Sadie, so many of the comments were like, you have to listen to the audiobook. So shout out to Scribd because everyone was right. Audiobook's amazing. Please go read it, listen to it. It's great. Oh, and if you love podcasts, Macmillan actually created a podcast based on this book that you can just go listen to separately, which is super cool. My next recommendation is 6 Stories by Matt Wesolowski. This follows a podcast, like a really popular crime-solving podcast, and in it there are 6 different stories being told by 6 different people. So again, I listened to the audiobook of this too a couple months ago, and it's like a full cast and there are all these different voices and telling the story of when their friend went missing 20 years ago. So in 1997, Tom Jeffries was found in the wilderness dead. And 20 years later, we're in 2017, and all of these people are being interviewed for this podcast because the mystery has never really been solved. And it's a really character-driven story, and this has a couple super good plot twists. Even if there are some that you might see coming, like, there are some things I guarantee that will surprise you. Like, this was super good, and it's a really short one too. I only mention that because if you can impress me this much, in 220 pages. Like, you did it. Okay, switching gears from like intense adult mystery, I have a light contemporary YA romance to recommend. It's Listen to Your Heart by Casey West. Casey West is one of my favorite YA authors, and the podcast element of this is we have our main character Kate, who doesn't want to be a part of this podcast in her school, but she's kind of forced into it, and she ends up being really good at it. It's like this advice podcast where people call in, and then this anonymous boy calls in and she has a crush on him, but he's asking for advice based on his crush on her best friend. So she has to decide like how to handle the friendship element. It's actually a really good story about friendship. It's not just this superficial like our friendship's over because we like the same boy. It's even better of a friendship story than a romance, but the romance is of course adorable because it's Casey West. And the podcast is super fun to listen to, and it's like a behind the scenes of a podcast too, which is cool. So highly recommend that one. All of these books got 4.5 or 5 stars. The next one I have is another adult thriller, and it's I Know You Know by Gillian McMillan. So this follows a guy who has a podcast called It's Time to Tell. And in some of these, like, they're established podcasts that have stories like that they're used to doing. This one is like a brand new podcast that this guy specifically started to solve the murder of 2 of his best friends. They died when they were kids, and then 20 years later he starts this podcast to try to interview people and get people to come forward and tell the truth about what happened to his friends. If you're into detective-based mysteries, this also has another perspective, and it's detective who solved that crime way back in the day, because someone has actually already been convicted of the murders, and this podcast guy just like doesn't believe it and wants to find out the real truth because he thinks there's something fishy going on, like with the detective. So the couple different perspectives are great. I also listened to this as the audiobook, and the audiobook is really well done, so check that out on Scribd too. And then lastly, I have my last YA one. It's Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. This is YA contemporary. I would say there isn't romance in here. This is like a 500-page book. I don't remember perfectly, but I do remember that the main focus of this is a platonic friendship between a boy and a girl, and she designs art based on this podcast that she's totally obsessed with and she listens to religiously. It's a super interesting fiction podcast that we get little snippets of called Universe City, and the creator of it turns out to be a boy that she actually knows in real life, and they decide to collaborate together. She's going to make art for his podcast, but his identity is a secret, and throughout this book a lot of drama happens, and he has to be like revealed as the podcast person, and she ends up getting revealed as the podcast person, and their friendship in here is just one of my favorites I've ever read. This is one of my favorite YA books I've ever read. This is a pretty intense YA contemporary from what I remember. There are some pretty dark storylines as well as this one's. I like my YA dark. There's a really good family dynamic in here too, and it's just a really authentic picture of like that end of high school moment when you have to decide what you want to do for the rest of your life and make college decisions, and the pressure from your family, and then mixed in with this really creative character and her friendship. It's so good. And that's it. Those are my 5 recommendations of books that have a podcast element. Thank you so much to Scribd for sponsoring this first installment of this series. There will be many more. Hopefully I'll do this monthly. And if you want to listen to any of these in audio form, especially Sadie, it's my #1 recommendation. Check out Scribd down below, click the link, sign up, free first month, and I'll see you later. If you have any other recommendations based on books that have to do with podcasts, characters with podcasts, please recommend them in the comments, and I will see you later. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!